Okay, Houndoom in Pokemon Yellow. What if this thing was in Generation 1? Well, it would have been very similar to Arcanine as another Fire-type, slow growth rate Pokemon. That said, I think Houndoom has a lot more going for it because its stats are distributed in a way that's much better for a fire type. After all fire type moves deal special damage in Generation 1. So it has 75 HP, 90 attack, 50 defense, 95 speed, and 110 special. Of the dark type Generation 2 Pokemon that were introduced, this is the one that synergizes with that type the best as well. That said, in Generation 1 for these backport series, I am not going to be backporting any dark type moves unless those moves specifically are the Pokemon's signature move. So Houndoom's not going to get any dark type stab today. However, its typing still will allow it to take no damage from psychic type Pokemon, which is great in Generation 1. Okay, so let's talk about how I backported this Pokemon into the game. First though, these are the rules. You can find them in the description later on if you need to reference them. Okay, so in Generation 2, Houndoom learns Leer, Ember, Roar, Smog, Bite, Feint Attack, Flamethrower, and Crunch. Luckily for me, all but 2 of these moves are in Generation 1, so I can just directly port those over at the same levels. Bite, of course, is going to be a normal type move, like it was always in Generation 1. I'm going to replace Feint Attack with Swift instead, so a move that bypasses accuracy checks. And then at level 52, instead of giving Houndoom Crunch, I'm going to give it Fire Spin. It always felt to me like Game Freak seemed to think this is the best Fire-type move in Generation 1. I have no idea why. It's absolutely awful. Maybe it's because it's a trapping move. Anyways, you can see how they designed around this move when you look at a Pokemon like Moltres, which starts out with Fire Spin as well as Peck, an absolutely awful learn set for a legendary Pokemon. In order to create a TM and HM set, I typically check 2 locations. The TM and HM moves that Houndoom can learn in Generation 2, as well as the tutor set from Generation 3. After all, many of these move tutors replace TM and HMs from Generation 1. By doing things this way, Houndoom gets access to Body Slam, Counter, Solar Beam, Fire Blast, and all of the other generic stuff you would expect on any Pokemon. One semi-generic move that it isn't going to be able to learn though is Reflect, and I'm drawing your attention to that because the champion's Sand Slash all the way at the end of the game is typically a major problem for fire types, and sometimes Reflect helps there. This is a suggestion I got left on my Arcanine stream from a little while ago. Just so everyone's aware, I produce all of this content asynchronously behind the scenes because I have to manage a team, and because of that, sometimes these runs get filmed out of order. So I completed the filming for this Houndoom video before I did the Arcanine stream, so I don't have any of the knowledge from that video for these playthroughs today. Another thing that I should note is that I'm doing this voiceover at the time before I have done Rapidash and Ninetales streams, but by the time this video comes out, I really hope that I will have completed both of those. So just keep that in mind while I'm playing this run. I'm not actually going to be able to time travel, so if you think I should have done something after the Arcanine playthrough and made Houndoom's times better, yeah, I can't do that. Unfortunately, I don't have a time machine. If you think it's strange I do things asynchronously, that does make sense. When I started this channel, I was doing everything one project at a time because it was just me making all the videos. Nowadays though, I have to prepare for events like this, October, which I have done so many runs during, and I'm also preparing for the end of the year, which once again is going to feature daily December. One video every day throughout the entire month. So filming this in advance allows me to prepare for the end of the year, which of course is going to be my busiest time. Alright, with that, everyone, relax. Let's sit back and watch a fire type run. One of my favorite typings to do these solo challenges with. I just love fire type Pokemon. They're actually so good in Generation 1 that I'm sure this run is going to be completely painless. With that, let's take on the first gym leader, who of course has a type advantage over us. Okay, so Geodude's first. I don't really know what to say here. This fight is actually kind of easy for Houndoom just because its special attack stat is so high. When I backported it to Generation 1, I don't think it would make sense to bring back its lower special defense as its special stat, although maybe Game Freak would have made this thing a terrible special attacker in Generation 1 as well. However, I don't really think that's the case because then it would fill absolutely no niche. So Brock's Geodude with special damage is easy to take out using 3 turns of Ember. After that, Onix comes in. Now the fact that Houndoom at level 10 is faster than his ace means that he's never going to deal damage to me with Bide, because I can waste time using Roar, which has no effect in trainer battles. I'm doing this instead of Leer because that move both shakes the screen and prints more text. I figured just going for Roar is going to save a tiny amount of time. So in the end, despite the rock type's resistance to fire type moves, that's not how it feels. As a kid, I always thought that fire type moves were good against rock just because they're special. So Brock is defeated, and with his badge I now get a 12.5% boost to my attack stat. I'm drawing your attention to this because it's kind of unfortunate for Houndoom. Right now I have no physical moves, and that's going to remain the case for a little bit. I have to get all the way to level 20 to get Bite, and that's going to take quite some time with the slow growth rate. And I gotta say, Game Freak, what were you doing? Arcanine, Houndoom, and Manectric all have this growth rate. They're all 2-stage dog Pokemon. That's the only thing I can see that ties them together. I'm at a little bit of a loss why these evolutionary lines deserved this growth rate. Maybe it's because Arcanine was originally intended to be a legendary, and it is called the legendary Pokemon in its Pokedex entry. That does make a slow growth rate feel fitting, but Houndoom, it just feels so wrong. I think this thing should be a medium fast growth rate, and so should Manectric. I am not looking forward to the day when I backport that thing into Generation 1. A slow growth rate electric type that is not also a flying type like Zapdos is just going to be absolutely miserable to play in this game. Luckily for me, Houndoom isn't miserable because Ember is actually quite good on Route 3. It dispatches all the bug Pokemon very quickly. By the time I reach Mount Moon, I've learned the move Smog, one of the worst moves in the entire game. 20 base power, 70% accuracy, and a chance to inflict poison, by far the worst status condition in the entire game. Needless to say, I need to level up to 20 as fast as possible to get access to Bite, so I'm going to do additional training inside Mount Moon. The reason I think this is justified is because Misty is the second gym leader, and I want to be as prepared as I can be for her. By the time I beat the Super Nerd, my Houndoom is almost level 18. Of course, I'm going to grab the Dome Fossil. It's the Halloween-themed one, and then I take on Jesse and James. Sometimes this fight is problematic, and yeah, with Houndoom, the Meowth gets a crit, taking me under half health, and then my Ember does what looks like half to the coughing. It uses Tackle, luckily not doing very much, and I 2-shot, so no issues today, don't worry. That brings me up to level 18, so still 2 more levels before I get Bite. That means I don't even have a decision to make inside of Cerulean City. Of course, I'm going to be taking on the rival next. His Spearow is a 2-hit using Ember. I was worried about the Sandshrew, but Ember is doing more than half. It does use a single Sand attack before I take it out, but then Ember one-shots the following Rattata. From there, all he has left is his Eevee, which isn't very good by this point in the game. Alright, throughout Nugget Bridge, I'm going to cut out all the trainer battles, and we can just watch me navigating the overworld. I'm doing this so that you can focus on the speed stat in the bottom left. Misty Starmie has 56 speed, so if I want to move first consistently, I need 57. By the time I clear Route 24, my speed stat has reached 51. I'm getting close, so I know it is possible, but I think I'm going to need slightly more experience than I would have liked. By the time I reach Bill's house, my speed stat has reached 54, which is not good enough. However, there is a choice I can make here to gain a little bit more experience and try and level up one more time. So when I head back to Cerulean City, instead I pass through the trashed house and fight the Rocket instead. These 2 Pokemon give me enough experience to reach level 22, and Houndoom has exactly 56 speed at this level. That's a little bit unfortunate. I'm going to be speed tied with Starmie. I could battle more trainers like this swimmer in the gym, but I don't think that's a good strategy. If I did, I would still not level up, and then I would have to fight wild Pokemon or go back to Route 24 and 25 to fight optional trainers. That kind of backtracking is going to be inefficient, and with Bite, a good special stat, and a speed tie, I think Houndoom has the tools it needs to defeat Misty. As the battle starts up, I just want to mention Misty has good AI, which means she's always going to choose water moves unless her AI overwrites them with an X-Defend, which she can only use once on each one of her Pokemon. My Bite does more than half to the Staryu it hits with Water Gun, doing not very much to Houndoom, roughly a 1/6 of my total HP. Okay, so in Generation 1, Bite does have a chance to flinch. I get asked that question all the time, so if I move first from the speed tie, I have another benefit. In this case though, Houndoom's base speed comes through for me, giving me a critical hit, and I'll get these about 1/5 of the time. Misty also replaces her water type move with an X-Defend, which is kind of perfect, although now Bite is doing less damage. It takes her ace under half health, then she chooses Bubble Beam, which brings me under half health. However, with my third Bite, I get another critical hit, bypassing her defense boost, and as a result, the Starmie faints. Okay, Vermilion City's next. On the way, I run into Sandy, who actually is kind of scary, not because her Pidgeys are going to use Sand Attack against me. No, Ember is going to one-shot them. What I'm worried about is them using Quick Attack because I didn't heal after the last battle. Luckily though, Houndoom pulls through without a reset. On the SSN, things are going to change for me. I can pick up the TM for Rest, which I want for the late game, just to ensure that things are as safe as possible. In my playthroughs these days, I try to avoid this move because it does waste time and it's also not always the most consistent thing to do. However, in first playthroughs, I always like having it available to me, just in case. Getting stuck at the very end and having over 100 resets, is painful, and it has happened before with a fire type with a slow growth rate. I'm looking at you, Arcanine. I also grabbed the TM for Body Slam, which is a great upgrade for Leer, and it's going to be my best physical move throughout the majority of the game. Unlike Arcanine, Houndoom does not get Dig, and that might be a worry if you're thinking about Surge, but don't worry, he's complete trash. After grabbing the rare candy, I take on the rival, not even healing before him because I know that Houndoom is going to be fine here. Although on reviewing this footage, the first thought that popped into my mind against Surge was maybe I gave him too much credit. I did heal before this battle. However, then the Raichu Mega Punches twice, with the second one bringing Houndoom down to 18 hit points. Luckily for me, I have enough damage to 3-shot the Raichu, so I would have defeated it anyway. That said though, if I didn't heal, this would have been an embarrassing loss. Okay, let's talk about Fire-type damage in Generation 1 and why I typically don't like this type that much. Houndoom is stuck with a move like Ember, so against the Wrapping Lass, you would expect that this would be the best move to choose, and that is the case. It has a guaranteed one hit on all 4 of her Pokemon. However, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that Body Slam does do more damage to the Bellsprouts. It doesn't matter here because the number of turns it takes to knock out the opposing Pokemon is the only thing that matters. However, as I continue to play this run, Ember is just going to fall off more and more. During this time, I expect it to feel like Houndoom is falling off, and then at level 41, it's going to get a performance boost with Flamethrower. Just inside Rock Tunnel, there's this trainer, a Pokemaniac, who has a Cubone and a Slowpoke, although I'm just showing you this because I want to draw attention to the fact that the Slowpoke does not have any Water-type moves yet. After that, I crush the Slowpoke trainer as well as the Status Condition Junior trainer and make it all the way to the self-destructing Hiker. This is a good example of how Houndoom is falling off when using Ember. I am not able to 3-shot the Pokemon that have really low special stats. They also have Rock Throw, which is super effective, and Self-Destruct, which deals massive damage. The second one blows up, taking me under half health. Then Graveler comes in. My Embers are going to take what looks like 4 turns to knock this thing out. Maybe 3 if I get some good damage ranges. The second one does look like it's a better roll, but the Graveler just chooses Rock Throw, and that gives Houndoom its first reset. This is a good place to once again compare the differences between Houndoom and Arcanine. The other fire type has Dig by this point, which allows it to easily crush these rock type Pokemon, whereas Houndoom is left kind of without options. I could be using Rest here to heal every time he chooses Self-Destruct, but that still isn't a guaranteed win. And then I have Rest on my set and I have to keep it there for the entire game if I want to have access to it during the champion battle. And I really do, because I'm expecting that I'm going to 2-shot the Sandslash and take 1 Earthquake in the process. That'll leave Houndoom on low health, so I want to be able to heal when the champion sends in his Executor. Seeing this as the eventual end state of the game, I wanted to play this fight without using Rest, and as a result I'm spamming Ember, barely not 2-shotting the Geodudes, and in this case I don't even make it to the Graveler, getting my second reset due to Rock Throw. Now sometimes things go Houndoom's way. It gets a critical hit against the first Geodude, giving it a 2-shot, which is perfect. There is some other upside here. Houndoom could inflict a burn, which would cut their attack stat in half, but I don't end up getting it, and yes, the Graveler is in fact a 4-hit with Ember. This time though it just ends up missing Rock Throw and I end up winning with green health. As a slow growth rate fire type, I want to play as safely as possible, so I'm going to go into the hideout to pick up an additional rare candy. I also grab some extra items so that once I reach the department store I can buy more vitamins. In this case I choose 4 calcium to boost my special and 1 carbos to boost my speed. Okay, time for the rival in Pokemon Tower, and I am only level 28. This is before the threshold that I originally suggested as when Houndoom would feel like it's falling off, but by this point it really does feel like it's falling off. It takes me 3 hits to knock out his Magnemite. Then against the Shelter, I made a misplay, which is using Ember against the water type. I thought that because it has low special and my special is high, this might be the most damage dealing move, but it isn't. Body Slam has a 2-hit, Ember has a 3-hit. That's a small mistake though. Luckily it doesn't have Clamp yet, so it's not dealing water type damage to Houndoom. Sandshrew follows, and luckily in this case it is a 1-shot because it has low special, and the ground type does not resist the fire type. That's something I always have to remind myself about. Last is Eevee, and even with a critical hit from Ember, I do not get a 1-hit. And with the rival cleared, now I have to head up Pokemon Tower towards the Chandler, which could cause problems. Once again with Arcanine, having access to Dig gave me 1-hits here, but with Houndoom, my Ember is not going to 2-shot the Ghastly, it's going to be a 3-hit. Well, unless I get a critical hit, but even in that case, I only have a 58% chance to 2-shot. I'm hoping that this is slightly illustrative of why I don't like playing fire types, although I will draw your attention to one mistake I potentially made. I could have fought Erica before this and cleared out her entire gym for additional experience. If I had chosen to do that, then I would be at a higher level for these fights and they would be a little bit easier. That said, I intentionally chose not to fight Erica because Ember isn't a very good move against grass types which have high special stats. Also, compared to her levels, my Houndoom is under-leveled, and I was a little bit worried getting hit by acid over and over again and having my defense lowered while I slowly knock out her final 2 Pokemon. Either way though, Houndoom was in a little bit of a bad position because in this case, not being able to 2-shot the Ghastly, I get taken to low health, paralyzed, confused, and yes, the Chandler gives me a reset. This is why I call her Agatha Jr. This fight can be really random if you're not able to just one-shot all of her Pokemon. It's very rare for a Pokemon to get more than 1 reset here, and yeah, Houndoom manages to pull it off. It doesn't get 2 resets, it actually gets a total of 3. Now this is where some of you, I am assuming the Fire-type fans, like Ike the Killer, are going to be screaming at me, why didn't you just make Bite a Dark-type move? Because if Houndoom had a same-type attack bonus Dark-type move, then it could just one-shot all of these Ghastly and not have to worry about this. Well, the reason is quite simple. When I'm doing these backports, I don't want to change the enemy team compositions. I don't want to change their moves, and I don't want to change their typing. This is one of the reasons I'm not going to be implementing the Steel type on the Magnemite and Magneton line, because then things start not feeling like Yellow version. It feels like a ROM hack of Yellow version, and yes, that is literally what this is. I'm specifically adding Houndoom to the game to see how it would do in Yellow version, and if I change Yellow version, then it's not really Yellow version anymore. Plus, my tier list would be irrelevant if I was going up against a Steel type Magneton in this case, because it would take super effective damage from Flamethrower, which would bias these results towards Houndoom when compared with another Pokemon that was in Generation 1 like Arcanine or Ninetales. If I changed Bite to a Dark-type move, then all the trainers throughout the run that have Bite on their moveset would also have a Dark-type move, which just doesn't feel right. I considered for a while adding a second copy of Bite to the game, which would be a Dark-type version for Houndoom to use, but to me this just didn't feel fair. When I backport other Pokemon, I don't randomly assign them moves from future generations just so that they play better in the game. I try to stick to sets that feature exclusively Generation 1 moves, with the only exception being signature moves. And to this day, Houndoom does not have one. The philosophy that I'm striving towards is if Generation 1 put Houndoom in this game, what choices would have they made with the moves that were already implemented? If it doesn't have a signature move, then they wouldn't have invented moves just for this Pokemon exclusively, they would have assigned it moves from the remaining pool. And in this case, they would have given it Bite, and likely then changed that move's typing when it moved into Generation 2. Now another fair way to approach this would be to assign Houndoom exclusively the Fire type for Yellow version, so that it doesn't have the Dark type at all. I thought about this when first approaching Dark and Steel types in Generation 1, but the reason I decided not to do it this way is because then how would I implement Fairy types from later generations? If I take for example Sylveon, I can't backport it and like arbitrarily assign it the normal type. It has always been the Fairy type. So to me it felt like Pokemon that have typings that don't exist in Generation 1 should have those typings backported. Anyways, that's a long speech for me to justify the reasons why Houndoom lost to Agatha Jr. 3 times. Yeah, it was really painful, but finally we're done, so let's head to Celadon City and face Erica next. Well, I didn't want to go into this too prematurely, so I do battle some of the trainers in the gym for additional experience. I'll draw your attention to this cool trainer, and I'm using Ember against her Weepinbell, but of course it is not one-shotting the grass type. This is the kind of nuisance I was worried about previously when I said I didn't want to come to the gym at a lower level. Having a bunch of fights like this where I take multiple turns to knock out the enemy's Pokemon really slows my pace down. I thought by going to Pokemon Tower I would gain experience and then come back here and one-shot everything, but even with that experience after a bunch of resets, I'm still not getting one-hits. So overall, this was just like bad mid-game play, I guess. I'm not really proud of it. Anyways, let's just face Erica. Tangela's first. Ember does more than half, which is encouraging. It misses a bind and I knock her lead out for free. Weepinbell's next. Ember is doing more than half, just barely though. Luckily, it just uses acid, doesn't drop my defense, and I knock it out in 2 turns. Last is Gloom, but of course I'm gonna have a guaranteed 2-hit here, and I have no defense drops. Well, I get one here, but it doesn't matter. Okay, next is Cycling Road. This area of the game is great for training. Well, for most Pokemon. Again, comparing with Arcanine, here it has Dig against all these poison types, which is really helpful. Right now, Houndoom's set is Ember, Swift, Bite, and Body Slam. Not great when you're trying to knock out a trainer who has 4 Grimer. None of my moves are able to get one-hits, so this battle takes me a total of 8 turns. Now you're probably thinking, isn't that the same with Arcanine when it's using Dig? And you're right, yes, that does take 8 turns, but you have to remember the second turn of Dig is shorter. This is because a portion of the turn is truncated. You never open up the fight menu and select which move you're going to use. So again, in this comparison, Houndoom seems to be losing again. I haven't lost hope in it though, because I think by the late game its special stat is is really going to start to shine in combination with Flamethrower. I fight 3 more trainers on Cycling Road, although I will admit that I went back to Celadon City to heal after the second one. I try to avoid this at all costs. That said, I had no healing items for my HP, so I wanted to go back so that I could fight the other 2 trainers here because they have really good experience yields. Defeating the final biker with his 5 Pokemon brings Houndoom up to level 35. We are still 6 levels away from Flamethrower. Next is the Safari Zone. I get 2 vitamins here, a protein as well as a Carbos, and then after digging out of this area, I head to Sylph. I could have made the choice to train in Koga's gym and then use rare candies before him to get Flamethrower for his bugs, but the option of Sylph makes sense if I don't want to use rare candies because there's a higher density of trainers that I can battle. In a first playthrough with Houndoom, where I don't know my damage ranges, using rare candies early on seems very premature. The late game is a gauntlet for fire types because we have Giovanni, Lorelei, Lance, and the champion, so I'm playing in a way that minimizes the number of total battles while maximizing my level at the end of the game. After doing more training than I would have liked, Houndoom gets to level 40, and I'm also approaching the 40-minute mark on the clock. Despite everything I've said, I would either have to backtrack out of Sylph or fight more trainers with poor experience yields, so I made the tough call to use 1 rare candy to get Flamethrower before battling the rival. And it was really worth it, and the damage ranges prove this. Flamethrower has a 70.7% chance of knocking out the Sandslash in a single hit. I get it here because of a crit. Against the Cloyster, my damage range is worse, only a 49.8% chance to 1-hit. Luckily though, it just chooses Withdraw, doing no damage. Against the Magneton, I'm gonna have to 2-shot. This is another downside of not having access to Dig. It exposes Houndoom to a Thundershock, which ends up paralyzing, which is generally frustrating because next is Kadabra, and it does a lot of damage with Confusion or Psybeam, but not in this case because I'm a Dark type. As a result, it can only use Disable or Recover, although it is going to choose any of its moves. This is not one of the scenarios like we've talked about before where the Pokemon has only not very effective or no effect moves. In this case, it has 2 no effect moves, Confusion and Psybeam, and then 2 neutral moves, Disable and Recover, so it's going to pick between the 2 normal type moves, giving me a free knockout. Last is Flareon, and its bites are doing a decent amount of damage. That said, Houndoom is able to pull through with 2 hits from Body Slam. Okay, Giovanni, absolutely simple. Don't know what else to say. I almost 1-hit the Rhyhorn, which is cool, and then I burn the Nidoqueen. So while it does have super effective damage in the form of Double Kick, it's not doing much damage because its attack stat was lowered. I want to stay in Saffron City because Sabrina seems like she would be free when using a Dark type. I'll grab the TM for Mimic first, and now let's go into the Sabrina battle, and we are going to roll the intro for this one because she's not quite as free as you might think. Her first Pokemon's Abra. Of course I can just Body Slam or Flamethrower this thing. It goes down in a single hit and never gets a chance to use Flash. This is where things get worse for Houndoom. She can actually attack me using Psywave because Sabrina does not have good AI in yellow version. In red and blue she would just spam Recover, but in this case she actually has a chance to attack and do damage. That said, it's only a 1 in 4 chance, well kind of a 1 in 5 chance. She could replace any of her moves with X Defend, so she could overwrite Psywave on the turn she uses it. I was just worried about the worst case scenario here, getting hit by a Kinesis and then her spamming Psywave over and over again, knocking Houndoom out. But yeah, that doesn't happen, don't worry. I probably led you slightly astray there. You were thinking I was getting a reset, but no, Houndoom doesn't. In order to beat Pokemon Yellow, I do need access to Surf outside of battles, so I can't delay Koga any longer. Inside the gym, I battled the mandatory trainers, also throwing in this Tamer for some additional experience. Okay, so now, let's face the Bug-type specialist. His first Venonat is obviously a 1-hit with Flamethrower. I'm just hoping that will continue against the next 2, which are at higher levels. The second one goes down, leading to the third one. I'm over a damage rounding threshold for this though, so it is also a 1-hit. Last is Venomoth. I was kind of hoping I would get a 1-hit here, but instead I get a Generation 1 miss with Flamethrower. Just perfect. Luckily, Venomoth's best move, or what it normally has as its best move, is Psychic, which is not going to do anything to Houndoom. So it's probably going to be prioritizing Leech Life in this case after it uses Toxic to poison me. That said, when I use Flamethrower, it just 1-hits and the Water type faints. By the way, welcome to all the new viewers. It's great to have you here. I'll take this opportunity amidst the confusion of my last statement to say that I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. So yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want to see solo challenge content in a bunch of different games. I'm also doing fun backports like this in Pokemon Crystal as well as Pokemon Emerald now. I just did the first few of those on stream this month, so check them out if you're interested. On the way to Cinnabar Island, I face Psych. Now, doing things in this order does leave Houndoom at a very high level for Pokemon Mansion, so it's not going to run into any wild Pokemon, which is really convenient. Well, there is actually a Raticate at level 46 on the basement floor that I could encounter, although I get lucky today and I don't run into one. Okay, time to head into Blaine's gym and face the Fire-type specialist, who by the way, is one of the hardest trainers to beat in Pokemon Pokemon Yellow. This will be a major surprise to anyone who plays a lot of Red and Blue. His first Pokemon is Ninetales, and I want you to check this out. Body Slam does only about a quarter, then Houndoom hits itself, Ninetales crits with Flamethrower, my second Body Slam takes it to orange health, and then Ninetales rolls another Flamethrower, taking me down to about a third. Houndoom hits itself one more time. Luckily, the bad luck kind of runs out here because Ninetales fails a Tail Whip, and I knock it out with Body Slam. Now, if you're wondering why Blaine was spamming Flamethrower against my Fire-type Pokemon, it's because, like Sabrina, he lost his good AI in Yellow version. This actually makes him a much more scary trainer. If the Ninetales was just spamming Tail Whip, Quick Attack, and Confuse Ray, I would have been in a better situation than if it crit with Flamethrower. With my health low, I was able to get by the Rapidash, but unfortunately not the Arcanine. Losing to it feels thematic. This entire video I've been comparing these two Pokemon, and yeah, Arcanine just does feel like the better one. Imagine if they had given Blaine's Arcanine Dig in the place of Reflect. That would have made Blaine nearly unstoppable, especially if he had retained his good AI from Red and Blue. Although then maybe he would have retained his Super Potion logic, which is just terrible. If you don't know, in Red and Blue, Blaine can use Super Potions when his Pokemon have full health. That's another small thing that Yellow version fixed because Blaine no longer does that. It's one of the factors that makes him a more challenging trainer in Yellow version. In my second battle against him, the Rapidash goes for Stomp, which gets a critical hit and knocks Houndoom out. Alright, so this is not going well. I considered using Rare Candies, but in the end I decided to teach Rest to Houndoom because my moveset is not constrained. I have Swift and Bite, and I'm not using either of those right now. I ended up keeping Bite just for the flinch chance because bypassing accuracy checks after Sabrina is not really important in Yellow. Okay, so Blaine is really frustrating. I make it by the Ninetales with decent luck, although I did have my defense lowered one stage. By the time the Rapidash comes out, I take a lot of damage. Luckily it rolls Fire Spin once, but then when I heal it goes for Stomp twice, taking me back down to low health. So I continue to heal, and eventually the Rapidash is looking like it's going to knock itself out with Takedown. Also, things are falling apart for me here because the Rapidash keeps using Growl, lowering my attack stat, so Body Slam is not going to hit the Arcanine for very much damage. In a case like this, I think Flamethrower is going to do more, so I have to use it. Plus, Arcanine has a chance of using Reflect to set up its defense, and in Generation 1 the screen never fades, so it's probably a better idea for me to just be going for Flamethrower anyway. I have to use Rest here to heal, giving myself the time I need to slowly chip away with Flamethrower and eventually win. Okay, that is not a great way to beat Blaine. It did not feel good, but we did it. Let's move on now to Giovanni, where, yeah, I'm not really feeling good about Houndoom's chances. That said, its speed stat is 138 as soon as I enter the gym, and by the time I beat the mandatory trainers, it's 141. I'm going to be faster than every one of Giovanni's Pokemon, so the Dugtrio is not going to be able to attack me or use Fissure, and his Persian is only going to get one attack in if I don't knock it out right away. Alright, so here is the ground type specialist. Dugtrio is first, I go for Flamethrower for special damage, and I get a Generation 1 miss. That is a terrible start to this battle. It goes for Earthquake, dealing massive damage to Houndoom, bringing me down to red health. Flamethrower does knock his lead out on the next turn, but then Persian comes in. I was expecting it to survive, and while it does, it just goes for Screech, which actually badge boosts me. Is that going to give me the damage I need to one-shot the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking? Well, the answer is no. The Nidoqueen survives with tons of health, chooses Earthquake, and Houndoom faints. Alright, that was a very uninspiring loss. I am going to do additional training inside of the gym, and then backtrack outside to grab an additional rare candy from the power plant. I only like to pick this one up when I'm using a Pokemon with a slow growth rate or a first stage Pokemon that I don't have good hopes for in the late game. There's also one more thing I can do to make Giovanni slightly easier. With my current rules, I don't allow Pokemon to use moves that boost your evasion if they obtain them through their move pool, so level up Learn Set or TM and HM Learn Set. However, I can teach Mimic and then Steel Double Team to set it up to boost my evasion. If you're wondering why I have this weird edge case in my rules, which seems to benefit fire types and electric types, yeah, that's the reason. Fire types and electric types are terrible against Giovanni unless they have this crutch. It's kind of been grandfathered into my rule set right now ever since the Porygon race when we discovered that this was a way of working around how my rules were worded at that time. Back then I was only banning specifically the TM for Double Team, so using evasion boosting moves from the Pokemon's level up Learn Set was allowed, as well as using Mimic to obtain the move. And it ended up being the answer that Porygon needed to have more consistency against Giovanni. Since then, it has become the staple solution for Giovanni with fire types after setting up this move 6 times, which also causes badge boosts, greatly inflating my stats. Then I can use Flamethrower to sweep the rest of his team. My only fear here is if he gets by my defensive setup with the Ride-On, lucks out and lands an Earthquake. He doesn't, so using Flamethrower I'm able to 2-shot his ace, and with that the gym challenge is complete. Okay, rival 6 time. I'm going to mimic Slash here so that I have guaranteed critical hits with this move. It'll give it a little bit more oomph when compared with a move like Body Slam. Flamethrower one-shots the Sand Slash as well as the Execute. Then on the Cloister, it once again just barely survives. It sets up with Withdraw again, not choosing Clamp, which is lucky for me. Okay, so here's the Magneton again. It would be easier if it was a Steel type, but without the Steel typing, it can take so much damage from Flamethrower. It survives with orange health, uses Supersonic, and Houndoom hits itself in confusion. Then the Magneton chooses Thundershock, which paralyzes me again. That's 2 times in this run. For a lot of Pokemon, this would be an instant reset. I wouldn't waste the time trying to defeat the Kadabra and the Flareon. But with my typing, trying to fight this out makes sense, especially because I have Rest. While in Generation 1 this won't replenish my speed stat, it will at least recover me to full health if the Flareon is getting scary. But I don't think it will be because its best move against me is Smog, and as I said at the beginning of this video, Smog is absolutely terrible. With 2 uses of Slash, I knock out his final Pokemon, and now I'm off to Victory Road. Earlier in this video, I referenced Ike the Killer. He is someone in the community who does a lot of solo runs. He's very good at them, much better than I am, and he has really perfected fire types, which are his favorite type of Pokemon. After watching a bunch of his runs and observing his play, some of the things that I've noticed that are a factor in his success is that he likes to do training in Victory Road to level up slow growth rate Pokemon before he arrives at Lorelei, where he typically uses most of his rare candies. There's a link to his stream in the description, so you can check him out if you want to. I'm mentioning this because inspired by him, I'm going to do some additional training in Victory Road. I fight a total of 3 trainers, bringing Houndoom up to level 51. This way, when I use my 11 remaining rare candies, I can go all the way up to level 62. I was pretty sure this was going to be more than enough for Lorelei, but a small amount of doubt does linger in my mind. She has a lot of water types after all. Okay, so for Arcanine, Dig is actually useful against the Dugong because you can dodge the first attack that it uses, and then hopefully it goes for Rest on the second turn. Houndoom does not have that luxury. Plus, I have nothing to set up with, so I'm just going to attack twice with Flamethrower and knock out her lead. But I took half damage in that process. I'm just hoping that Flamethrower has the damage range I need to knock out the Cloister. And I get a critical hit, so it goes down in 1 turn. I was curious how lucky I got there, and after reviewing the damage ranges, it turns out that Flamethrower was going to one-shot the Cloister no matter what. With Lorelei sending in Slowbro, this is where things get complicated. I need to mimic Amnesia to improve the damage from Flamethrower and reduce the damage from her water type attacks. Now, the Slowbro has a chance of using Surf on the first turn, but it also has a chance of using Withdraw. On the second turn, it has to use Withdraw, and then beyond that, it's going to continue randomizing between the 2 water type moves. In this battle, I get lucky. The Slowbro lets me set up to full, and then I start my sweep. I outspeed the Jinx, knocking it out in a single hit, and from there I was expecting the Lapras to go down to 1 hit, but it does survive. However, its health is so low that it triggers a Super Potion instead of an attack with Hydro Pump, and as a result I knock it out on the next turn. Okay, Lorelei was easier than I was expecting, and you know who's even easier than Lorelei? The guy in the next room. I spammed Flamethrower a total of 5 times and one-shot every one of his Pokemon, including the Machamp, which very rarely happens. Okay, time for Agatha, and this one's actually an interesting battle when using a Dark type. Regularly, she's difficult because her Pokemon have powerful Psychic type moves. For example, the Haunter has Dream Eater, and the final Gengar has Psychic and Dream Eater. Getting hit by a stray Hypnosis can be frustrating, but she's going to be damaging Houndoom with moves like Lick, Mega Drain, Wing Attack, Leech Life. I guess it is super effective, but it is just Leech Life. So in the end, Houndoom's typing just makes this battle simple. But the same cannot be said for the next trainer because the fire typing is an extreme liability against Lance. Sometimes I get asked weird questions like, if you could add 1 move to every Pokemon in Generation 1, which Pokemon would benefit the most from having 1 move added to their set? To me, it seems simple. The answer to this question is just fire types. If you have any of them and you give them Thunderbolt, they're going to be so much better at the game because Lance's Gyarados is a nightmare. Check this out. Houndoom, with lower attack when compared with Arcanine, does about 1/3 with Body Slam, and then Gyarados uses Hydro Pump, doing more than half. So there are 3 ways to win. Paralyze the Gyarados, prevent it from attacking. Crit the Gyarados, knocking it out in 2 turns. Or rely on Hydro Pump missing once. I get quite lucky because in the second battle I paralyze the Gyarados and make it buy it. Then the Dragonair that follows just goes for Hyper Beam, bringing me down to red health, but I can use Mimic, survive 1 more Bubble Beam because of my high special, take my time, rest up, and then knock out Lance's final 3 Pokemon with Ice-type damage. That battle was not nearly as challenging as I thought it was going to be, but typically the champion is the best trainer in Yellow version, so let's see how this battle goes. First up is Sandslash. My damage range with Flamethrower is a 1-hit. Alright, that's perfect. Next on Alakazam, I can use Body Slam to knock it out, and then move on to the Exeggutor, which obviously takes super effective damage from Flamethrower, but I was surprised when I got the 1-hit because Exeggutor has amazing special. One consequence of me one-shotting the Sandslash is that I wasn't able to mimic Earthquake. I was hoping to do that before the Magneton. That allows it to paralyze me with Thunder Wave, and then use Screech, which is not that bad. It badge boosts me, and I knock it out. Only 2 Pokemon left. Cloyster is the first of them, but in this case it has lost Withdraw, so it's going to spam Clamp. And since I'm paralyzed from the Magneton, it's always going to be moving first. It would have to miss for Houndoom to win. And it doesn't, so that's a reset. So in this case, the game is harder because the Magneton does not have the additional Steel typing. If I was able to one-shot it with a super effective Flamethrower, then the Cloyster wouldn't have been a problem. Although because of my typing, the Magneton is randomizing its move choices, so it can just go for things like Screech and get 2-shot, never paralyzing me. That's what happens here. With Flamethrower, I can 2-shot the Cloyster because yes, it does just barely survive. It misses a Clamp and I take it down. So Flareon is last, I have full health, and even though I didn't mimic Earthquake, Body Slam is able to get the job done in only 2 hits. With that, Houndoom clocks in with its first playthrough time of 59 minutes and 42 seconds, with 10 resets, 0 blackouts at level 65, with a game time of 3 hours and 41 minutes. This is an okay first playthrough, but for a fully evolved Pokemon with an incredible special stat, it is definitely an underperformance. Right now in the tier list, this is a time that would earn it a spot in the E tier, behind Pokemon like Muck and Scyther. So yeah, let's do another playthrough and get a better result with Houndoom, because obviously it should not be in the E tier. What I realized coming out of my first playthrough is that with Houndoom I overtrained. The reality of the situation is that I'm looking for luck against the Gyarados, so provided Body Slam can consistently 3-hit, then I'm good to go. And the level that I figured out worked best against it was 58. This gives Houndoom a 93.1% chance to 3-hit, although it is a little bit worse when you consider it from the 2-hit damage range. If I critical hit, it's most likely the case that the Gyarados will survive my second attack, although I still have upside from Paralysis as well as Hydro Pump misses. You might be curious about the damage ranges at level 60 or 63. They don't really improve the 2-hit damage chance very much. At level 63, it's only 33.3% chance, and I didn't feel this was worth 5 additional levels with a slow growth rate Pokemon. And there are some major benefits from cutting this many levels at the end of the game, because now I'm going to be able to use my rare candies earlier in the playthrough and fight less trainers overall. Although I'm not going to cut those trainers from the early game. I still want to do the training in Viridian Forest, so I arrive at Brock at level 10. This ensures that I have decent damage ranges against his Pokemon, and I'm also taking less damage from the Geodude's Tackle. Now I said cutting training from the early game was a bad idea, but that's not always the case if you can rearrange a section of the game. So I can cut training from Mount Moon, knowing that I'm going to battle the rival first on Nugget Bridge. This fight does end up being quite close, but once I make it by him, I can then go all the way to Vermilion City first, explore the SSN, and level up here. This also gives me access to Body Slam when I come back to face Misty. With it I have a 66.5% chance to 1-hit the Staryu and a 33.3% chance to 2-hit the Starmie. But the major change here is the fact that I'm level 23, so I now have the outspeed, which makes this fight so much more consistent. By the time I've defeated Surge, these 2 routes have synced up and I'm now a minute and 20 seconds ahead. My approach to the mid-game is very different. I teach Rest before the self-destructing Hiker to hopefully make him a little bit more consistent. Sometimes he's going to use Rock Throw multiple times in a row, or he'll use self-destruct twice in a row when I'm sleeping and knock Houndoom out. This is a frustrating reset, but I'm going to continue going with the playthrough. I didn't lose that much time. If I have a great Lance, then this can still be an exceptional run. Throughout the mid-game, my ordering is slightly different. Pokemon Tower first, which is still a little bit risky, but with Rest, the ghosts are less of a problem. Then I go on Cycling Road to do additional training. With Rest, I never have to go back to the Pokemon Center, even if I get poisoned. Then after the Safari Zone, I backtrack and take on Erica. I'm now only 19 seconds ahead of my former time, largely due to the reset against the self-destructing hiker. But this is where things are going to majorly change, because once I defeat one rocket inside of Sylph, Houndoom levels up to 36. I'm now going to use 5 rare candies to go up to level 41 and fight the rival immediately, cutting so much additional mid-game training. We went through them before, my damage ranges in this fight are great, plus the immunity to Cadaver's attacks means that even luck like Magneton paralyzing me isn't really something Houndoom needs to worry about. Sabrina is essentially free as we saw before, although this time she does use Psywave multiple times, taking me down to orange health. A little bit scary, but I do win. Okay, so Koga is obviously simple, but the trainers I fight now are really important. I battle the Tamer inside of his gym, as well as Psyche heading south to Cinnabar Island. Alright, I'm gonna pick up doing this voiceover on another day because my voice got really tired on the previous recording day. I'm gonna sound a little bit different, I'm sorry if that's a bit jarring. Anyways, I just want to remind you at this point that all the training I'm doing in this section of the game is so that I reach level 58 for facing Lance's Gyarados. Inside the Cinnabar gym, I face one more trainer, the guy right by the entrance. He has 3 Pokemon with decent experience yields, and this brings Houndoom to level 46. Now I have 5 rare candies, and I can use those to boost myself up to level 51 before Blaine. I'm doing this because I really don't want to repeat scenario of what happened last time, losing time here to the Fire-type specialist when I resist his most powerful attacks. Being a higher level really does help, especially if I want to play more defensively using Rest later into the fight. This time, Houndoom pulls through with a first attempt victory. That now puts me 8 minutes and 35 seconds ahead of my former pace. Just before Giovanni, I'm going to lose a little bit of this lead as I face some optional trainers inside of his gym. This cool trainer, this black belt, as well as this final cool trainer right next to Giovanni himself. This battle is much easier now that I know that I need to use double team. Once I set up on the Persian, then I can just crush his team and not take any damage. The rival is straightforward, and surprisingly, after Giovanni and him, I am now 10 minutes and 1 second ahead of my former pace, so I am just crushing my previous playthrough. Doing the training and the rare candies in this order means I don't actually need to do any training inside of Victory Road. I can just go straight into the league and face Lorelei. The damage range I want you to focus on here is against Cloyster. It seems like with Flamethrower I would be able to one-shot it fairly easily, but that's not really the case. If I want to be using Flamethrower, I need to go to level 61 to have a 93.7% chance to get the one hit. If I'm not going to be able to manage that damage range, then I figured I should just 2-hit the Dugong as well as the Cloyster and then chance things against the Slowbro. There's an alternative strategy here, which is using Fire Blast, which has a 74.3% chance to one-hit the Cloyster, but if I did that I would have to give up one of my current 4 moves, and I need all of them for later threats during the league. Of the current moves, the one that makes most sense to drop at this point for Fire Blast and better damage ranges is Flamethrower, but I don't want the chance to miss. I think this is largely a stylistic choice. If you want the best possible time with Houndoom, I think the Fire Blast strategy is actually superior, although it will be less consistent. Plus, we've been doing a lot of Arcanine comparisons, and I really wanted to use Flamethrower in the late game because Arcanine didn't have access to it. Because of my stubbornness around Fire Blast, I have 3 resets here because of the Cloyster getting annoying with Clamp and then the Slowbro using moves like Surf. Eventually though, it just spams Withdraw and I set up Amnesia and then sweep the rest of Lorelei's team. Holding onto Flamethrower makes the Hiker very simple because I'm not going to miss against his Pokemon. And even at this level, most of them are one-hits with only the Machamp surviving. Okay, so I'm still 10 minutes and 14 seconds ahead of my former pace. As I'm facing Agatha, you'll notice that I start at level 56, partway through this level. As I defeat her ghosts, I level up to 57, and then I can use my final rare candy to go up to 58 before facing Lance. I got what I thought was a really lucky start, defeating the Gyarados immediately. However, then the following Dragonair messes everything up with Thunder Wave as well as a critical hit. Surprisingly, I only had 1 reset to the Gyarados before I defeat it again. The first Dragonair doesn't cause problems this time, I mimic Ice Beam, and from there Lance is simple. Alright, let's talk champion damage ranges because this might be another reason to use Fire Blast in the late game with Houndoom. Against the Sandslash, my Flamethrower only has an 18.4% chance to one-hit, and the Sandslash has a 48.4% chance to one-hit with Earthquake. My idea here is just survive 1 Earthquake, which is a roughly 50% chance, knock out the Sandslash, the Alakazam can't do anything to me other than Kinesis, and from there the battle gets very straightforward. I do have a quick reset here to the Sandslash before I knock it out in 1 hit on the next attempt, and then I just 2-hit everything from from there. By the way, the Cloyster just misses Clamp in this attempt, and the Flareon actually does significant damage because I got hit by Screech, but in the end I pull through and Houndoom clocks in with its time of 49 minutes and 33 seconds, with 7 resets, 0 blackouts at level 60, with a game time of 3 hours and 6 minutes. Okay, before we proceed, I'm not going to do another playthrough with Houndoom, but I do want to talk about some alternatives for the champion. Since I'm not using Mimic during this fight, I could teach Fire Blast in its place to get an 85% chance to knock out the Sandslash. The more powerful move won't help against the Alakazam, Body Slam is going to be the right choice there, but it does also give me a slightly better damage range against the Exeggutor. From there, Flamethrower is the more consistent choice, so I should be relying on it. I also wanted to keep Rest around just in case I needed to heal against the Flareon. Sometimes things can go wrong with paralysis from the Magneton, as you have seen before. And if you really want Rest at this point in the game, it is possible to not teach it earlier in the playthrough and instead just go through the self-destructing Hiker using Ember as I did in my first run. While this is slightly riskier, even when using Rest it's not a guarantee, and the healing move does slow down the pace of the playthrough. If you're comfortable taking on the Hiker without Rest, then it's also easier to fit in Fire Blast for Lorelei, making her Cloyster easier. I think if I came back to do another Houndoom run, this is the strategy I would play, but overall a 10-minute and 9-second improvement over my former result is enough for me today. Okay, thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon and through YouTube memberships. This video is going to have a little bit of a weird ending, so hang around. First though, we are going to face Professor Oak, and I always try to battle his team, which is going to be best against the Pokemon I'm solo running with. In this case, the Blastoise team, so he has 2 water types, including his ace Gyarados. This fight is really tricky for Houndoom. The Blastoise can hit with Hydro Pump. It can also just use Withdraw, which is great. But then the Gyarados only has Hydro Pump as a water type move, so it's going to spam this. By the way, Lance's Gyarados and Oak's Gyarados share the exact same move pool, except Oak's is level 70, so it is dramatically higher than my Pokemon at this point. The only solution I could come up with is mimicking Hypnosis from the Exeggutor, and then putting the water types to sleep to ensure that Houndoom will survive. Of course, this is not an official part of the challenge, so even though Houndoom has some resets here, actually multiple resets here, it's not going to affect its overall placement in the tier list. With a time under 50 minutes, it's going to earn itself a spot in the C tier, in this case ahead of Pokemon like Arbok, Bulbasaur, and Rhydon, but behind Pokemon like Magneton, Pinsir, and Jinx. Overall, it doesn't look like it did very well. However, that's until you compare it with the current ranking of Arcanine and Rapidash, which are 1 tier below it in a very similar spot. However, like I said, I recently did a re-ranking of Arcanine on stream, and to this point when I'm doing the voiceover, I had not yet done Rapidash or Ninetales. So I think I'm going to finish this video out quickly talking about what happened with Arcanine when I streamed it. One of the contributing factors to Arcanine's low placement in the tier list is the fact that when I originally played it, I expected more consistency out of the Pokemon I was running. I really didn't like luck-based strategies, so I was playing more conservatively, over-leveling. Having to do that with a slow growth rate Pokemon dramatically impacts its results. I was finishing the game at level 64, but Arcanine doesn't need to do that. As we just saw with Houndoom, which has lower physical attack, I can make it by Lance's Gyarados at level 58. So here's the strategy I came up with for Arcanine. You can see that I've distributed my rare candies throughout the playthrough, 2 early on before Misty to make her slightly more consistent, then 1 right before Koga to get level 40. I'll just cut in here on Blaine's footage because I want to show the fact that Dig makes him so much more consistent when compared with Houndoom. I do not need 5 rare candies here just to boost my level to have a slow fight against him, and Arcanine does not need to rely on rest. I fought Blaine before the rival in Sylph so I can get the special boost as well as the Fire Blast TM. This allows me to one-shot his Sandslash as well as his Cloyster as long as Fire Blast doesn't miss. From there, a combination of Dig and Body Slam one-hit his 3 remaining Pokemon. I used 3 rare candies before Giovanni so that I have good damage ranges against his ground types, and I'm also relying on Double Team for this battle. 5 rare candies before Lorelei. This ensures that I have better damage ranges against her, plus it's going to ensure that I reach a good level to take on Lance, in this case level 59. Oh, by the way, just before him, Agatha is so much easier when I have access to Dig. Houndoom does have immunities to her Psychic type moves, but it still takes time to knock out her Pokemon using Flamethrower or Fire Blast. Arcanine, on the other hand, just one-shots everything with the exception of the Golbat. Okay, so Lance, at level 59, I have a 32.4% chance to 2-hit the Gyarados. Once it goes down, I basically play the fight in the exact same way as I did with Houndoom, moving on to the final battle against the champion. Since Arcanine's special is lower, I only have a 53% chance to one-hit the Sandslash, but because my defense is higher, it doesn't have a chance to one-shot with Earthquake, so I will survive that portion of the battle. This gives Arcanine another unique opportunity. Because the Sandslash is doing less damage, I can mimic Earthquake from it, then knock it out, use Earthquake against the Alakazam, and I now have a way to one-shot the Magneton, so I'm not going to get paralyzed. From there, things are straightforward, as long as I'm able to two-hit the Cloyster with Fire Blast. And Arcanine clocks in with what I believe is its 10th playthrough overall. Its time is 46 minutes and 8 seconds, with 5 resets at level 61 and a game time of 2 hours and 57 minutes. Okay, so I tried everything in my power to try and improve Arcanine's ranking from here. I did many follow-up attempts on stream, and all of them gave me worse performances than this. The reality of the situation is that fire types are just inconsistent, almost exclusively because of Lance's Gyarados. A little bit because of Lorelei as well, and a tiny bit because of Giovanni, but outside of that, they're really quite good for solo challenges. It's just the Gyarados messes everything up for them. I should also note that I think that fire types are going to be far better in red and blue. While the Gyarados remains the same between the two games, Lorelei is going to be easier because her Slowbro doesn't know Surf, and Giovanni is completely incompetent. Plus the champion's ground type is Rhydon, and we all know that it's trash. It has both Leer and Tail Whip. Okay, so the new results boost Arcanine's placement from the D tier all the way up to the B tier, where it is now slightly ahead of Clefable and just behind Poliwag. Yeah, Poliwag is the best first stage Pokemon, but it is still a first stage Pokemon. So well done Arcanine, but still not as good as the first stage water type. Okay, that's it for this video. Tomorrow I'm coming back to do another yellow backport. We are going to try Sableye. While its stats are low, its typing is fantastic defensively. If you've made it this far, you're incredible. I will see you then.